how to best train the hamstrings for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. The hamstrings are the muscles on the back of your thigh. And here you see that we have an anatomical model showcasing what would be a left leg if someone is standing up. So if you were to look at someone straight ahead, this here is where the other hip would join. This here is the outside of the hip. So if I'm standing up, this is the outside of my left hip. And these here are actually your quad muscles. So what we're going to look at is the back here, which is your hamstrings down here. These are your glutes. And then you'll see a bit further down that we have your calf muscles. And this here is very, very important for us to discuss. So, your hamstrings, they really do two things. And this here is very important. And we're going to understand why. So down here, we have the knee joint. Up here, we have the hip joint. So when I say hip joint, we're talking about the bones up here connecting, forming your hip joint. And when I'm saying your knee joint, we're literally talking about your thigh bone and your shin bones coming together here to form the knee joint. So, when we are dealing with your hamstrings primarily do two things. They help you bend your knee. So if I have my knee straight like this, they help me bend my foot towards my bum. And they also help my glutes to push my hips forward. So if I'm doing a deadlift movement as an example, so let's say that I'm here, I deadlift, and then when I come up in this position here, my glutes are pushing my hips forward, but my hamstrings are also helping my glutes do that movement. And that kind of explains to us how and why we want to make sure that we do a variety of exercises to improve hamstring strength for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So we need to train the hamstrings to help our glutes to push our hips forward. Very important. We call that hip extension. So we have to train the hamstrings in hip extension. But I also have to train my hamstrings in knee flexion so that all these other muscles, such as some of your calf muscles, don't do too much of that movement. Cool? So deadlift variations are fantastic for this. But you can't just, well, I think you can't just choose whatever deadlift variation you want. And my reason for that is that a lot of people struggle with lower back issues. A lot of people deadlift with really poor technique, and you also do a lot of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, presumably, since you watched this video, and that means that you probably aggravate some of these lower back issues. There's a lot of people in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that have lower back issues, often because they spend a lot of time being really curled up, and at the same time, their body can't really tolerate a lot of that sort of force that's put on your spine. Cool? So, some of my favorite variations, which you will see in other videos, is a Romanian deadlift, a pull through, and also what we call a glute bridge. They're all going to target this upper part of your hamstring very, very well, and they're going to put very little pressure on your lower back. So a Romanian deadlift, and imagine now while I'm doing this movement that you can see these muscles here actually lengthen up top and take all the load. So Romanian deadlift starts in the top just like this. You have a slight bend in your knees, not completely straight, not too bent either, but a slight bend in your knees. You're then going to imagine sitting your hips back while your arms are sliding down with the load. Now I'm stretching my hamstrings up top here, really nice, and then I'm going to squeeze my bum standing up. That's a Romanian deadlift, really. That can be done with a barbell, dumbbells, and all those kinds of things. Then a pull through, I would have a band or a cable behind me, attached to something behind me. I hold that in between my legs here, and then the band is going to pull my hips backwards into this position here, and then I'm going to use my hips to drive forwards. And the reason why they are some of my favorite exercises is very simply put that I can easily manipulate the positions to put people into the slight variation that works well for them. And I also, especially with the pull-throughs, I keep the load very close to the hips. That means that the lower back is not going to have to do as much work, and I can really focus on building people's glutes and hamstrings. But if we want to have a complete hamstring development, I need to train this distal part as well, which is where hamstring curls are fucking brilliant. It can be machines, it can be on a stability ball, you could use valve slides, you know, the ice cream lid looking things that make you slide back and forth. They're all fantastic. But what we have to remember, and the thing that a lot of people struggle with, is that they say the machines aren't functional because it doesn't look like jiu-jitsu. No shit, Sherlock. Jiu-jitsu is done on the mat. Hamstring curls are often done in a machine. And yes, you are right. Maybe for some people, not doing them in a machine would be more beneficial. For some people, doing them in machines would be more beneficial than doing them on a hamstring ball. They are both creating the hamstrings down here to pull my knee towards my bum, and that is the most important thing. And there are a few things that you have to consider. Jiu-jitsu is not just solely hamstring curls. So let's say that you're in you're in bottom half guard, cool? So you got one leg around them, you're bringing them towards you, maybe your top leg is kind of pushing away a bit, so you're getting this push-pull kind of, you know, control of the person's hips. In here, I'm not just doing hamstring curls, guys. I'm using all these other stabilizing muscles. I'm in a weird position. I have to think about my hands and framing and, you know, doing all these other things. But our goal using hamstring curls is to get this part of the hamstring strong. So if that means that you as a person, you use a machine to make that happen the most efficiently, you have now reached your goal. It's that simple. Maybe down the track, should you possibly, potentially, maybe use a ball or another variation? Yeah, sure. Maybe that is the case. But the most important thing is that you realize when you're training your hamstrings for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, you train this part up here to help your glutes to drive your hips forward by doing things such as Romanian deadlifts, glute bridges, pull-throughs, all these great variations of deadlifts. And then you use your hamstring curl variations to train this bottom part here in order to make you really strong in bringing your heel to your bum. And that is how you train hamstrings, I suppose scientifically, anatomically, whatever you want to call it. Let's call it anatomically because we're calling this series Anatomical Jiu Jitsu. So that's it. That's hamstring training.